All right. We ready? Good morning, team. It is 9:01 on this very rainy May 6th, 2025, and we got a lot of good work we're doing today in this work session. Don't think we have many presentations, but we just have work and, we don't have visual presentations. But let's start with our roll call, please. Ms. Wood?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Norris?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Dr. Shank?
Here.
Ms. Upchurch?
Here. All right, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Well, we're going to jump right into things. I think this will take up a lot of our time with B1, and this is our B policy discussion. And just to remind everyone, there is a matrix that we have for our B policies, and we took a set of policies, and I thought this would be a great exercise for all of us to know and get that experience and lean into policy development, since we are a policy governance board, and what that looks like. And so choosing the B policies was a good way to do this, because these are the policies that are our governing policies for how we do our board work specifically. So what we will do is we will go through these and then just have a good old discussion about them, and then we will have a first reading with red lines on any ones that are necessary at our upcoming May regular board meeting, and then we will have a second vote on those during our June board meeting. So jumping right in, for the matrix we have, and it looks like I am not logged in, so to see who was our first set. Here we go. Ms. Wood, who's our...
While you're doing that,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Wood, do you have, my laptop's in the shop at the IT department. Do you have the matrix I sent over several weeks ago?
I can find it in email.
For when, and I'm happy to go first if it helps be efficient, Tiffany. You just let me know.
Okay, let me first pull up.
You can't find
I'm sorry,
something.
I'm also having to log in and things.
Okay.
So our first
Chris might have it.
So our first ones that were up were, Ron, you were the first ones up, but if you want us, while Vicki pulls that up, if you want to go in reverse order, I can start. Does that help?
Yeah, Chris might have a copy of it too, right? Because I think I copied you in on the email.
I can't get into my email.
Boy, we're a mess this morning, aren't we?
Well, how about I start then?
Yeah.
So I had policies BEDH, which is public participation in school board meetings. Then I also had BEDH-E, which is the digital public comments for school board meetings. I had BG, school board policy process, BHC, board access to records, and then a potential BID, BIE, which is school board compensation, expenses, insurance, and liability. So I'll start with the first ones I had, which was BEDH, public participation at school board meetings, and BEDH-E, digital public comments. I didn't recommend any changes because we just updated those not that long ago. Some school boards across the state and across our region have a lot stronger and stricter guardrails and parameters around their public comments. We do not, and it's my personal opinion, this is why I did not suggest any changes, that although it could potentially cause some mind traps, so to speak, I think personally that being open, transparent, and listening to our community and having that opportunity to hear voices, and yes, we open it up that there may be somebody that doesn't live in our district that comes and talks to us. And if that were to become a problem, the board in the future could always visit that. But my personal opinion is that we should be listening to all voices. So I didn't make any suggestions or changes on that. Some school districts, for example, will prioritize students and staff than community members, et cetera. So I didn't make any suggestions. But I would love to hear your feedback on that before we move on to the next set, if you guys have any different thoughts or opinions.
Didn't we debate this a year or two ago?
Yes, we did.
In my time on the board, it hasn't caused any problems that I'm aware of, so I don't see any issues there.
Why create one?
I mean, yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Then we'll move on to, yeah, and we did have this discussion, and we had landed on siding on, erring on the side of openness. Okay, so the next one I had was BG, which was school board policy process. I didn't make any recommendations on this one. What I do like about our school board policy process is we are open and we do allow for comment and input from our community, from our staff, from our students, from our parents, from us as a board, from our staff. So I didn't make any recommendations to the school board policy process either. And I looked at, with the side notes of is there a potential that are we in compliance with other D38 policies and procedures? And I didn't see any conflict there. Ms. Wood, did you?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I didn't make any recommendations to change that one either, if you guys are good with that. The next one was BHC, Board Access to Records. This one I found very interesting. We do have this policy. It was started in 1972. It was last updated in 2016, and I had printed these out because if the board wanted to look at these and not click on, you could just click on it. But this one is, I can't find this policy in any other school district. So basically what this policy says for those at home is when a board member wants to access records and do a record request, those records are sent to the entire board. I don't know if it's redundant. I don't know that it has a specific purpose, but I would love to hear your input on that. And we'll pass them around if you guys want to peek at them.
Which policy is this, Ms. Upchurch?
This is BHC, Board Access to Records. It's not a required policy. I could not find it with other school districts. I don't know if they'd already gotten rid of it because it's just a outdated policy. I might have printed too many copies of that one.
And our current BHC is now posted here.
Yep, and you can look up there for what the current BHC is. So honestly, my recommendation is if it doesn't serve a specific purpose, if it doesn't ensure governance and ensure accountability, if it doesn't serve its purpose, then do we want to just get rid of it? We can do that. And it's up there for your reading pleasure as well.
Our practice so far in reviewing policies has been to remove policies that are not necessary, but that's something for you all to discuss and decide.
So I didn't see that I don't see how does it ensure that we are being held accountable for something? Does it ensure that we are being transparent in something? I don't think it serves either of those. So since it seems like others have gotten rid of it, it may be a policy we no longer need. So my recommendation is just to remove it, but I would love to hear thoughts. Mr. Schwartz.
Are there any liabilities that we can perceive in removing it?
That's a great question. The question is there any liabilities that could be perceived by removing it? That's a really good question.
My question is, related to that is there an instance where we would need to do this? And you think of an obvious instance. Brett?
Yes, sir.
Just for context, yes, I've seen that play out in former district with former boards where you have an individual board member really pursuing personal agendas and going in and reviewing documentation unbeknownst to the rest of the board.
Okay.
And so, yes, this could be, and this ended up being a protection, and then that board ended up adopting later after the fact. But damage had been done to that point.
So there is an element that holds accountability in there. Okay. We can keep it. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another on it.
I guess maybe given, if we think about it in terms of what Mr. Ridgway just said, And given the fact that if the board membership is somewhat fluid, right, 2 of them change almost every other year, that this might be a good protection if there's no real enhanced liability with keeping it, then it would be logical to me to have, it's sort of like an airbag in a car. You never want to use it and you always want to have it there.
Sure, I like that. Okay,
So you're saying that having a process for doing this and making it transparent makes more sense than not having it?
Yes, I mean, given the fact that, look, we've always talked about this, we have a luxury of a fairly to very good set of camaraderie amongst the 5 of us. And it would be highly unlikely that one person would do something nefarious and start digging into records. However, we're not all 5 going to be here all the time.
Right.
And we don't know what the future will hold, and therefore to have some kind of a safety valve for that, it's, I think what Mr. Ridgway was explaining this policy provides. Is that, am I understanding that
No,
correctly?
no, definitely, and yeah, this, in a sense, what this really provides is protection to the staff to not have to react because someone shows up at their desk. And so by saying, no, there's process, we need to go through
It's
process.
proactive.
Yes.
It's a proactive safety.
I think we should keep it.
and it holds each of us, we hold each other hold that honor and integrity up as well. Mr. Norris, thoughts? You like it?
Updated with no changes.
Okay, no changes. Okay, then the last one that I had on my set is, and this is an interesting one, this one came about from some recent legislation. We do not have this policy currently, and we can choose to either not have the policy or have wording around the policy, and that is BID, BIE, and I'm gonna share a couple different versions. There's a CASB version, and then I also pulled up just our neighbors to, I'll just, how we have it is, there's D49s, and this is the CASB version to look at, and I'm gonna give you one for everybody, except for, well, for the board. So here we go. What this one is, here, let me give one to Patty. This is why I like work sessions. There you go. So what this one is legislation was passed that says school boards can compensate themselves. There are some legal parameters around that. I have a personal opinion on this, but I will get into that in a minute. But basically what it says is that by law, school boards can compensate themselves not to exceed $150 per day that they're working. The board has to vote to compensate themselves, and with that, it has to be during times that's documented that they're working. Right now, what we do is we may find we'll sometimes, if you turn in, say you have to attend something on behalf of the board and you have to pay parking, you can get reimbursed for parking, for example. The board would have to vote to compensate, not ourselves, because you cannot compensate yourself. It would be future board members. My personal perspective on this is I am not in favor of us as board members. I know that we do a lot of work and we do it voluntarily. My personal feeling is we're not paying our staff and our teachers a competitive wage to our neighbors yet. And if we can't do that, then I do not feel comfortable compensating ourselves. And I think that being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, we are elected, and we run for the board knowing full well that we are doing this with a servant's heart, without compensation. So I am not, as one board member, in favor of compensating ourselves, but we could draft a policy on it. D49 says that board members shall receive no compensation for their services. The CASB one says that the board may, if it so chooses, to vote to compensate future board members. So we have 3 options. We can either A, make a policy that says currently that we will not compensate ourselves. We can draft a policy that says the board has the authority to vote at a later time to compensate later board members, or we just don't have the policy at all. which we currently don't have the policy.
I'm in favor of no pay. I think the true spirit of being a volunteer and a public servant is you're going to get a higher caliber of person if you're not going to offer pay and incentive. That's my thoughts.
One of my issues, I agree with you, Chris. One of my issues is that some people, have to pay for childcare and that sort of thing, and I wouldn't want it to be prohibitive for them to be able to serve. That's my biggest concern, is that you might not get someone who would be really good because they couldn't afford to pay, childcare is expensive. So that's my only concern. I think it should be volunteer, but I worry about that.
Thoughts?
I agree. I don't feel like this needs to be a paid position. But as far as the policy goes, there are additional components to the policy. So,
I believe we have, don't we already have liability insurance? Yes,
Yes, we have
Okay.
educators' legal liability insurance for you.
so that's covered.
And before we leave that one, I can remember cautiously, because it's 6 years ago, signing some documents after the election, and I looked the superintendent in the eye and said, "Tell me about liability." Because when you have responsibility for multiple buildings and 55 or 6,500 kids and probably 4,000 families associated with them, and you live in an over-litigious society, there's a lot of opportunity for liability claims. And that this, I think, is far more important than cash compensation on an hourly, daily, or monthly basis, because the numbers are bigger, the emotional baggage is bigger, et cetera, right? And so I just want to make sure that we and future board members are very well protected, because the spirit of what we're doing is to trying to make life better in our country and for our kids and our employees. So can you, in a very brief 2 sentences or less, explain the depth and the breadth of the liability policy that we have?
Well, yes, so they have, it's called educators' legal liability. And so that it covers all board members, administration of the district. And that's why it's a key point in terms of how we try and operate things from a business side, and we focus on the fact that, who can sign contracts, who can make certain decisions. It's to fall within the proper constraints of that policy. So it is, I don't know the numbers, I can look it up here, I think I have it on my computer, but it's several $1 million. And so it's a very good protection that, and again, being part of the school district self-insurance pool with 100 other plus other school districts, they're all operating under that same. It's provided good protection for everyone.
Right.
is it in policy anywhere that will be maintained so that we're protected in that sense?
I would have to research that and answer that for you. I'm sorry, I don't know that offhand.
I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to have it in a policy that covers us. So, I like seeing that somewhere it's easy to reference. I don't care about the compensation part. I mean, I think a policy saying that we will not be compensated is fine, and then having those additional components in there.
Okay.
But in essence, this says no compensation, reasonable business-related expenses are covered, and board members are not personally liable.
Okay.
That's the
So-
spirit of the policy, yes?
If I'm understanding correctly, and you can just nod heads, that I will work on drafting and partnering with Ms. Wood and Casby and our superintendent on drafting a BID/BIE policy that we don't currently have. That's short, sweet, gets to the point, makes sure that we're covering those 3 bases. And there's some good examples out there. Again, all I did was pull up our neighbor district, and that's where I came up with this one, so, okay. All right, so with that, we now get to see who wants to go next. That was just mine.
I'll be happy to go next.
Okay.
But just to be clear real quick, Ron, you and I did swap, right, because of my error. So I have no idea how I royally flubbed that one up. But I'm going to have to go back and look in the video to see where I erred.
There could be several of those, Chris.
I would not disagree with you.
Yeah, mine, the ones I took was the ones I made that matrix on that you and I talked about.
Yeah.
So I think we should be gold.
So the first one is BAA policy. And that's board operations. So I really don't have, I do have one change. And at the end of the first paragraph, I put, and board self-evaluation. I was careful to sign us up for something, so I did not make the matrix. I have something in mind if we're agreeable to that, but what I added was the board self-evaluation piece, and that's to ensure continued effectiveness and accountability. The board shall conduct an annual self-evaluation. The evaluation will assess the board's performance in areas including governance, policy development, fiscal oversight, community engagement, and its relationship with the superintendent. The board will use a standardized evaluation tool to facilitate a comprehensive and objective process. The self-evaluation will serve as a mechanism for the board to reflect on its strengths, identify areas for growth, and ensure alignment with the district's goals and visions. The result of the evaluation shall be used to inform board development, enhance governance practices, and establish performance goals for continuous improvement. The superintendent shall provide input as part of the evaluation process to ensure alignment between governance and district operations. So, I have a matrix that I'll be more than happy to put before we vote on this, to put before everybody for review, but it's just one tool that I wouldn't mind using for accountability.
One suggestion as we work on a matrix for the evaluation system, we may consider adding that as a regulation to the policy.
Oh, gotcha.
So I'm gonna,
But all of the details that you explained would live within the policy itself.
so I'm just suggesting we
Self-evaluate.
turn up the flame and hold the feet to the fire a little bit more.
So, quick question.
Yes.
I concur. I think accountability is important and valuable. Can you provide us maybe a couple sentences on how you see this playing out in an example?
So maybe perhaps yearly with the superintendent review, because we have a matrix that we go over then. Maybe we use that time to do our self-evaluation, right? So policy development, we have a matrix with how we did on a scale of 1 to 5 for developing policies that enhance the lives of our kids. So fiscal oversight, how we're doing with,
So follow the strategic plan.
basically, yeah.
That's a nice model. Just in general and in spirit or intent, do you guys concur? That would be nice for, we hold our customers accountable with a report card, right? Shouldn't we hold ourselves to at least the same, if not a higher standard?
So completely coincidentally, I am partnering with CASB and some other school board members, and we are working on the new leadership workbook that CASB produces every election cycle. And board self-evaluation, there is a section that we are writing on that right now. I think there's huge value in self-evaluation. It could be done during a board retreat. Would be a perfect time to work on your self-evaluation, where you're working on not just yourself, but your peers and the board as a whole. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
And
It's missing from this policy as opposed compared to the CASB model.
But this is why we have this kind of discussion, right? This is great stuff.
Also, the degree to which we follow the B policies. The ones that I was working on were mostly around ethics, and mostly are around ethical violations, and that would be a good thing to add to that. You know, that there have been no ethical violations, and that the board is following the policies, the B policies specifically.
So I just had a thought, not random, but potentially interesting thought pop in my head. This feels like a best practice, right? Since we're not really tied to a compelling event to put this in place, yeah. What if we chose to dig in and take the next 6 months and test ourselves on this and figure out what the guidelines or the brackets look like, and then put it into policy before the November election so that we can have a best practice model that protects our customers no matter who ends up on the board. And I'm not saying anything nefarious is going to happen,
No.
but I'm saying the more best practices that we have in place and we have a little bit of runway, let's test it with ourselves
I like that idea.
and figure this thing out. But let's commit to do it and figure out how we want to measure ourselves from April 6th to October 31st, or whatever that date is, right? And we won't get it right, but if we get it really good and we put it into policy with a little bit of flex for the next set of people, right? Because there's only one reason to measure yourself, and that's to make sure you continue to do well
And improve.
raise the bar. And that's what our customers put us here for, and that's what our students deserve.
One of the things I noticed when I was reading my 5 is that I didn't know much. And I've read all the policies, but I did that at the very beginning. They were new to me, again.
One could make a career, I think, studying these policies.
Right, but even just the B policies to me look like a set of training wheels for board members, and I didn't remember those. And so, you know, the ability to help others know these, because this is important to us specifically, some way of helping new people remember these, especially us coming up maybe with the most important points that a new board member needs to remember.
Mr. Norris?
Yeah. You know, I really put this in here, Ron, for the next set of board members, not for me. That being said,
No reason you shouldn't raise their bar, Chris.
if it's okay with everybody, I really like that aggressive approach. I really do. And
It's not that hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if everybody's okay with it, I'll put a matrix together and I'll send it out for some constructive criticism so we can finalize it and fill it out, and I'll get that out within the next few days, pending my email.
Would it be helpful? I have some handouts. This is something that we've covered in different conferences. I'll hand them off to you.
So is it already established? Is there one already built?
There are a couple different matrices on
Okay.
board evaluations that are already built, but we should make sure that we are tailoring it to what's important for D38. And I like what you said, Mr. Schwartz, Ron, about how does it align with our strategic vision?
Yeah.
And the reason I thought about that is I was thinking part of our evaluation on whether we are effective board members or not is not just what we're doing here on the dais, but how are we engaging in our community? And so that community feedback and that community perception, I think, also should be taken into account when we're looking at how are we being effective, as well as our staff. How are we engaging with our staff members as in that supportive role? How are we engaging with our superintendent, since our relationship is to our one and only employee, our superintendent? So there's a lot of different things to build in there, and that effectiveness and governance. So
One last thing, I really like the inclusivity of feedback from the superintendent, right, the 360-degree review. So it'll give future superintendents an opportunity to tell us how bad or good we're doing without fear of recourse.
So that was my one vetting question I was going to ask real quick before we leave this topic for Brett and Amber, and potentially Alicia. In your experiences, are there any things in this particular topic, are there any things we should be cognizant of or thinking about that are either potential bad tangents to go on or phenomenal practices? Very briefly, but just, does anything pop into your mind that if a board's going to go down this path, here's your 2 top or 3 guiding principles or places you should never go?
Both Brett and I have experience with board self-evaluations and 360s in the past. I'm not remembering any pitfalls with that. You may, Brett, but in my experience, it was very good for the board to self-reflect as well as to get feedback from the executive team members that primarily interact with the board, and we can think about what community feedback might look like as well. We could look for some examples that are used from other districts to help guide your work. That might be helpful
Right, and we
as well.
have these advisory groups now that can help too, right?
Yep. Good stuff.
Sorry. My experience with 180 or 360 feedback, however you want to say it, has been very positive, and it's good to deploy it through, deeper into the organization and not even just at this level. And so really important for people to have the opportunity to provide feedback and for people to be able to receive it. So.
Okay. I would say it would be good for it to contain information that is really numerical, quantitative, and also qualitative. I think both are comparable to what we do with evaluations of all of our people in the system, and I think that while it is sometimes hard to take one over the other, quite often qualitative can be difficult. I think that's how we grow. So that would be my input.
Thank you.
Anything else on
Nope.
yours? Okay.
We'll go on to the next.
Yeah.
And I'll pick up the pace a little bit. BAAR. Line item number 2, there are 2 shalls. I crossed them out and put must. And line item 4, there is a shall, and I changed it to must. Everything else remains the same.
Are there any legal reasons we wouldn't want to do this?
That's what I was going to ask too.
That's, yeah.
Let's check with legal to make sure that legal speak is not my bucket of when they say shall and must and may. I know the difference between shall and may, but it seems like it
Will
goes back and
versus
forth.
may, yeah,
Will.
same
Yep.
concept.
Yep. So if shall and must mean the same thing, then
But must is interpreted by most as being more directive. And that may be good in this case, I think is where Chris is going, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm in favor of what Chris recommends. I just want to make sure it doesn't generate an incremental liability that we haven't thought about or something wonky, for lack of a more elegant term.
and I've got all these, I mean, I've got all these red lines done in each of these policies, so I just,
Okay,
I'll get them out to everybody so they can physically look at the changes
Exactly.
that I've made. So it'll be a little easier to see versus just me speaking about it.
okay, next one.
BBA. So I've got changes to number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6.
What were the nature of your changes?
I'd have to read them out.
What was the intent?
Just changing verbiage to align it better with CASB's policies.
Okay,
So,
so to make it more succinct in terms of the spirit of the policy?
correct.
Is it, this says that it's current with CASB right now.
It is.
Okay,
Next one, BBBA, board member qualifications. I'd made no changes.
It's incredibly broad, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I actually have one question on that, because it came up in the potential board members meeting we had. When was that? Last Thursday night, I think? Is this state law?
which one?
I am going to jumble these letters. BBBA.
BBBA.
This one about board member qualifications. I have lots of thoughts here, but more
Wait,
importantly, is
let's-
this state law? Okay, next.
Yeah, the state references are at the bottom.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
The legal references from state statute are at the bottom there that
Yeah, so
encompass
if
what
we
is in the
deviate from that,
policy.
are we breaching state law?
Depends what's in the state law, I guess.
I'm trying to pull it up.
The state laws say that unless you have unless you have a judgment for sexual, for sexual offense against a child, unless you have that, you're eligible. So my question is that the state law?
Yes,
Okay, well then, I retract any thoughts. It's irrelevant, because we have to comply with state law.
I mean, I think we could be more restrictive if we felt like it.
Well, that's where I was going.
So more, are you looking to get stricter rather than,
Yeah, here's the
That's right.
double-edged sword. The double-edged sword is we've had a lack of candidates in the last 5-6 years. So why would you get more restrictive? Conversely, if we dialed this in a little better, I wonder if we might attract more of the people that could do a quality job and continue to raise the bar and provide a safe and highly productive educational environment for our kids. That's all.
I think the only thing that you could change differently on here, which would require a referendum on a ballot, is that ours says that the candidate must be a resident of the director district in which he or she is the candidate. Because we have director districts, that's that way. And what we learned from legal when we looked into this was that we can, if we went with at-large candidates, instead of director districts, that would have to be approved by the voters on a
Right.
on a year where there is not
An
a
off
candidate.
cycle.
Yeah, on an off cycle. Yep.
Why don't we shelve it? I think we're going down a hole.
But the rest,
Unproductive.
the rest is that as far as the residency, the 18 years old, the no felony convictions on or against a child, that's all law.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry for the tangent.
No, this is why we are doing this, because I know that this is going to take long, this is going to be our longest item on our agenda, but I think this is so good that we're working through this. It's very productive. Okie dokie, sir.
BC.
Okay,
All right, number 2, I slightly changed from tantamount and for the rest of that, starting at tantamount for the rest of that sentence. And I put, that would be perceived as likely to improperly influencing a reasonable person to depart from the faithful and impartial discharge of official duties, or that the member knows or should know is primarily intended as a reward for official action taken. Then I've got that redlined in here so you can see the difference. And then I added a number 5. Board members shall disclose any potential conflicts of interest and recuse themselves from any decision-making processes where such conflicts might reasonably be perceived to compromise their impartiality.
There's some legislation about that right now. They're actually making it, right now, school boards, I don't know where it landed, I don't know if it's still going through the system, we can look at that. But currently, school board directors, they're being stricter on what is perceived as a reason for you to not vote, to recuse yourself from a vote. So let's say, for example, I can't even think of an example right now, but what they're limiting is the reason, they're limiting, being very narrow in scope of what would qualify you to be able to recuse yourself from a vote, a board member. So I don't know where that is, and I don't know if it ended up getting introduced. It was just something that was discussed, and I can learn more about that. But basically, what it's narrowing it down to is there's very few reasons that a board member would recuse themselves and say it was a conflict of interest.
So I assume there's a difference between recusing and abstaining?
Same thing, in my mind.
Okay.
Yep,
Choosing not to play
yep,
on that one.
yep.
Why would there be fewer reasons rather than more?
Because what they're trying to avoid is making it easy for a board member to wiggle out of, this is an uncomfortable vote, and so I'm just going to not vote because I don't want to.
Be perceived as making a commitment in one way or another.
Got it.
Conversely, let's say, Patty, you owned a construction company, and you were one of the bidders on the CIC. Then you would want to recuse yourself.
Right. I was thinking along those lines rather than reasons why you wouldn't vote because you didn't want to commit.
Well, and by policy, she couldn't anyway, because you can't have any
Right.
This does not allow a board member to have any financial gain, so she could own a construction company, but her company could not bid because she sits on the board.
The only question I have is this isn't there I'm sure there's a state government guideline or law that says as a state employee, you can only receive X amount of dollar value of gifts from someone that has potential to do business with your entity, right? There's something in place?
I'm not
Used to-
aware of
used to
a
be $25,
law, but we do
$50
have
value.
policy in place in our school district that speaks to that.
Brett, are you aware of any?
I'm sorry, I'm still going down the what's abstaining versus recusing.
Well, this is very valuable. How are you doing with that, sir?
Oh, I'm reading something right now that I think might be interesting. It's in board docs.
So in the federal government, for example, I think it's $25 a year for federal employees. There used to be a guideline for the state of Colorado for state employees that they could receive a gift up to X dollars of value on an annual basis from someone that had the potential of doing business with the entity they worked for. Any knowledge on if that truly exists and what it is, and if it's a guideline or a hard and fast number?
So my understanding is that it's $50
A year.
a year.
Okay.
And in terms of your part, is it a guideline or, I think it probably is statutory, but the enforcement of that, there's no particular enforcement mechanism on that.
Okay. Just something for us to be aware of, because from time to time, those situations can come up.
Everybody good? Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah. I think having changes that are substantial or changes the nature of making sure that Again, increases transparency, holds us accountable versus wordsmithing, or I don't like, is there a difference, Mr. Ridgway, between abstaining and recusing?
Recusal refers to a board members who remove themselves from a particular matter, especially regarding conflict of interest. Abstention refers to simply withholding a vote. So recusing is more like backing out even of the conversation and the debate, the dialogue.
Okay,
A little more complete.
gotcha.
All right, that moves us on to BCR. I almost feel like I'm in touch with my inner Casbian legal system the way I'm nailing these, huh? All
I
right.
promote you to doing this full-time. Congratulations.
No, just to be clear.
Okay.
First sentence, board members are required by law to disclose certain items received in connection with serving on the board. I deleted that period after board, and I put in accordance with state law and local control provisions, period. That's the only change I made there. So the very first sentence is going to read, let me rephrase that. The very first sentence I would like to read is, board members are required by law to disclose certain items in connection with serving on the board in accordance with state laws and local control provisions. And again, I'll send this out with the red line so you can chew on it. And if you got a problem with insomnia, you can read these and overcome that problem.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a visual person, so seeing is easier for me
All right.
personally.
So that being said, I'll get all these out to the board members, and I'll put my,
Send them to Vicky, and she can get them out to the board members.
I'll do that,
Thanks.
yes, as well as my self-evaluation matrix.
My only suggestion might be that some of these might need to go through legal counsel.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Should we do that before or after? I mean, I don't care either one, but,
Possibly before.
okay.
Or you would go too far into looking at revisions. I think it might be best if legal counsel reviews them.
Okay, yep.
That would be acceptable, or if Tiffany would direct me to do so.
Yep. Let's do that. Send them to Ms. Wood.
Yes.
And then she'll get them sent to legal.
Done
That
and
work for
done.
you? Okay. Excellent. Okay. Moving along and speeding things up. Who would you like to go next?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, like per usual, I did not realize we could do wordsmithing, so there is no wordsmithing done on mine.
Well, if we don't need to do wordsmithing, if it's,
I read them.
Good.
And looked for the commonality with the CASB policy, and that's all I did. And now I want to go wordsmith because I really like that wordsmithing, but I'm not.
It does make it easier as we continue to review these every so many years, if we know that the CASB policy is legally sound, that we stay as close to that as possible, knowing that we still have the authority to make changes to fit our district needs at the same time.
All right, good. I did it right. I realized as everybody was going through that I was in another universe. So my first question, BCR, is that BCR should go after BCA policies. Because I'm anal about that stuff, so I have a question. Why is BCR before BCA?
Because alphabetically, the dash comes before the A.
because it's a regulation to BC.
Yeah, it's an accompaniment to the
Oh,
BC
got
policy.
it. Okay, got it. I officially now can call myself new again because I didn't get that.
Yeah, but at
Good
least you
question.
think about the why.
I did, and it drove me nuts. It's like BCR should not come before. Thank you. Okay, and I do understand that. So, okay. BCR is disclosing items. It is the school board member financial disclosure, and what must be disclosed. And I made no changes to this
Okay.
one, obviously, because CASB, this is exactly the same as with CASB. And I'm going to hurry up and go to the next one.
Okay.
So I sound less dumb.
No.
BCA-E1 Code of Ethics. And I wondered why BCA-E1 and BCA-E2 aren't together. If someone can enlighten me so I can learn more about that.
So if you want, so BCA-E-2 is very similar to the one that Mr. Norris had
Yes.
On conduct. So part of it is financial, and then part of it is the role of the board.
Okay. All right.
But I don't know. I would love an enlightenment on if there's a reason that they should or should not be combined. That's the way everybody else has it, but
Okay.
just because everybody else
All right.
does it doesn't mean we have
These
to.
were just questions
Okay.
that came up for me.
Keep going.
All right. No changes to either of those.
Can I want to say
yes.
something on BCA-E-1, Code of Ethics.
Yes.
When you look at that, Ms. Wood, yeah, you have that one up. So this is one that I use, honestly, this is one of the ones that I frequently use the most when I am contemplating my role as a board member. And like one of them on here says that for example, that as a board, we take no private action that will compromise the board or administration and respect the confidentiality of information that is privileged under applicable law. And another one on here that I think is very important is that recognize that the Board of Education functions only as a board through duly adopted policies and actions approved at public sessions, that individual Board of Education members have no authority to act on behalf of the district or the Board of Education unless authorized by resolution or directed by the Board of Education. The reason I bring that up is I was just recently asked, why didn't I as a board member act on something? And my response was, this is our policy, and we are a policy governance board of education, and I cannot speak on behalf of D38 or on behalf of the D38 Board of Education without having a public discussion with my fellow board members, because we, as a governing body, make our decisions together. So I just wanted to point that out. Sorry, that was my soapbox.
I thought this was incredibly important for new board members, and that it would be good for any time we had new board members to go over this policy and interpret what it means. Situations that have come up, because plenty of situations have come up in my year and a half, that I wish I had read this first. Not that I did anything in opposition to this, but this would have clarified for me what I can and cannot do. I think it's really, really important, just in general, that we have a way of going through this with new board members, and maybe other things as well, and that's, Ron, one of the reasons why I like your suggestion so much, is we will come up with things that are not, there's so many, I read them all in the first 2 or 3 months, and when I went back through it, I didn't remember any of this. I've learned this just from things that have happened. It would be helpful if there were key things that new board members, anyway, that's it. The next one is
BCB?
BCB, and there are changes on this one. And the changes are related to federal law, adding some more information to conflict of interest, and I just took the CASB changes and added them.
Where are the ads?
You'll see, it's not redlined because I have a black,
They're underlined.
yeah, a grayscale printer. They're underlined.
Got it. It's on page 2 and 3.
Yeah. Right. So this one is going to require some bigger updates. Okay? And I read through that too.
And then the last one, BDA, there were no changes.
Okie dokie, speeding things up because we have some presenters at 10:30. Todd or Ron?
Gone first and lost the last few times.
Okay, I'll be quick. So you go. I can be pretty quick with mine here. I really only paid attention to the two policies that were up for review. I mean, I glanced at the other ones, and I didn't see anything that needed to be done.
Okay.
And let me find my spot here.
So no,
So let's see. On BEAA, I had a couple of things I highlighted here, and I did the red line on the Google Docs version. I don't know if that's easier to pull up, but pretty simple. One of the comments in there, one of the provisions in there says a board member who seeks to attend and participate by electronic means in a board meeting shall notify the board president and superintendent at least 3 business days. That all makes sense. Actually, I guess it was the next one. A board member who attends and participates by electronic means shall identify the location from which he or she is participating, those present, and the extenuating circumstances that prevented the board member from physically attending the meeting. I don't know that we need to be saying why we're not there, as long as the board president understands why. I don't think that needs to be announced to the public.
I don't think it needs to be announced. I think your personal privacy doesn't need to be announced to the public. These two, BE and BEAA, both of these, some changes came about during COVID. And so a lot of what the guidance that I've been hearing from legal, from CASB, is that it's, we're not in COVID times anymore. So it's time to get back to the expectations of boards of education to be, electronic means is not to be meant as a tool. It is meant to be used as a, extenuating circumstances is when you need to use that, but it should be used conservatively. So my thought is, when you're looking at these two, is what is best practice and what is legal. But you get to make those recommendations.
Well, that's the thing I wanted to bring up real fast. The one section up above that I wanted to potentially add is, let's see. For purposes of this policy, extenuating circumstances means the board member's job or military service, inclement weather, and/or unsafe driving conditions, and I had suggested adding, or injury or illness, prevent the board member from physically attending.
That's a good add, yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to review as a board real quickly. Ron?
Might want to add a family obligation. Or is that in there?
It's not currently in there.
No, it's not currently in there. What constitutes a family obligation? So, for example, if my kid has a soccer game, I can't miss a board meeting because he has a soccer game. I still have to be at the board meeting.
But if your kid's ill, or your in-laws are ill, and you have to go care for them, and there's nobody else to do it, or you had a pre-planned family event that causes you to be in another city that's been on the books forever or just couldn't be moved and you're the only one, then you take the meeting remote.
Let's look into legal on that, because there are some legal guidelines on this, but I don't know what they are. And I think that us reviewing this now is really helpful because we're about to set our calendar for coming up for next school year so that we would know, like what's a family obligation, so that I would know when a board meeting is. But perhaps there is room, I don't know what you guys think, is there room for when you said illness or injury by a board member or their family members?
I think you could add it to those.
Right.
But we have to remember the last section that I was going to review, which is the one that says that we may participate by electronic means in a maximum of 2 board meetings per calendar year. So we need to decide if that's an appropriate number, because I reviewed last year and we are not completely in compliance there.
Right.
We had a board member miss at least 3, so, or participate remotely. So is that an acceptable number? Do we need to hold ourselves accountable to making sure we keep it under those 2? I mean, there's no consequence for missing more other than the board president may restrict any future electronic participation.
I've always wondered, yeah, or else what?
We'll get some legal counsel on this and
Okay.
bring it back to you.
I think we've discovered, or I have, that participating at a distance is not like this. So it should be as little as possible.
I could definitely tell a difference. Our IT team has done a great job of improving the experience remotely. Looking at videos from a year ago versus our most recent ones, it's a huge difference. The cameras are doing a better job. We have access to the remote content, and that's all important. But you're right. I mean, having this face-to-face presence, I think, is important when we take on this role. So,
Right. So, and since we have all the board meetings in advance, and we do vote on them, if I remember correctly, we say, yes, this is good. We should be putting that in our calendars and not having anything else. I mean, I understand if you're ill or you've had an injury or something like that.
Unexpected.
There's nothing you can do about that. But we should generally be there because we had that on our calendars.
So this is a double-edged sword, because we also are trying to attract 2 new quality board members. And if we if we're not cautious, we also will scare people away.
I
right?
get
And
that.
so it's going to be very, very far from perfect. And I think maybe as we consider this a little bit, I think we probably are best off putting a lot of this at the discretion of the board president, because we could have scenarios where we can have brackets or guidelines, but in general, everybody concurs being in the room where it happens is the best place to make things happen, to understand how they happen and influence them. Conversely, if we have somebody that owns a business and they have a business emergency and they have to go take care of it, or someone that has a role where they travel, and it just is part of how they feed their family, or something I haven't thought of, those are the obvious ones. We don't necessarily want to detract them to say, hey, look, you have to be in the 80132 10 months out of the year, or this is not going to work. That's my point. I remember Matt Clausen said this really well a year or 2 ago when we were going through what board member qualification should be, and he goes, let's be careful not to distract versus attract a quality individual because of how they earn their living or something in their family and that kind of stuff. That's my point.
As the board president, I am not comfortable putting that on any one board member to be the decision maker in that, because we are a 5-member board and it works, we work well together, but in the future, you don't always know what board you're going to have. And you don't know who's going to be your president. So limiting power, I think is important to make sure that, and honestly, in my opinion, a board president should have the least amount of power. because they are governed by the board and the community. So I think we each have equal voice. So I would prefer a policy that doesn't put all of that ownership on a board president to say, yeah, let's say I don't like Todd, and I'm like, yeah, Todd, you need to be here. And I'm like, yeah, Ron, you're all good. You go ahead and go do what you want to do. So making sure that it's fair and equal.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of guidelines, not in terms
Gotcha.
of decisions. But anyhow,
Well, and we can revisit the number if we wish to, or
Well, let's get some legal on this, because
Yeah.
I do know that this has come up as a topic of discussion in different boards, and there are some best practices that, yeah, when we set our calendar, a year in advance, extenuating circumstances means emergency situations, not I'm going to go ahead and go on vacation and not go to the board meeting, because when you sign up to be a board member, that is part of the sacrifice of being a board member. Is I can't go to Florida right now to tend to a sick relative. I made an obligation to my community to be here on this table, engaging in the work that needs to get done. But there are always going to be emergencies and extenuating circumstances, and I too would not want to handcuff to the point of it being difficult to fill a role because we're so handcuffed.
absolutely.
But to your point, we are not in compliance on, so whatever it needs to say, let's make sure that it says it correctly.
You-
That's my opinion. Sir?
You got any, coming down with a little something. Do you have any, what are your thoughts on this? So we have 22 board meetings a year, so 2 can be absent for electronic means, so that's 10%. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any? What this seems a little stringent, right?
it feels a little stringent or tight.
What are you thinking?
I think it should be something like a range, and it should be at the discretion of the board and the individual, right? This is a volunteer job. It's a part-time thing. We want. It's funny, you can have committed a felony and being convicted of it and be a board member, but you can't be an executive that travels 50% of the time. Think something's wrong with that picture?
I'm curious how, I remember there was a board member that was an airline pilot in a different district, and so I'm curious, I would love to lean in and learn how different districts do this.
Right, and that's my point. There's certainly a practical way to do this, and I mean, stuff happens, right? I think there's times in 6 years where I've actually not even attended a board meeting, and probably you too, Tiffany, right?
I've missed 3 in 8 years.
Yeah, so there you go, right? But yeah, it's probably somewhere between 10 and 15 or 10 and 20%. But I think the percent is less important than the impact. There are also some meetings that have a far more docile agenda than others.
Definitely.
But you don't always know that in
You
advance.
never know, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
so
You
you
also
can't.
don't know when your car breaks down, right?
Right. I just
So-
think that one of the things policies for us need to do is to tell us what works and what doesn't, and why. And I've always wanted to be a school board member, but I traveled too much, so I never did it. And I did it last year, or whatever year it was, because can't remember, because I was able to, finally. I mean, I was also thinking about that, like with compensation. I know some people who would love to do this, but they'd have to have childcare, which is another extenuating circumstance, and they can't do it unless they have the money to pay for the childcare.
Right.
So there are things that are written that are in our policies because it needs to be that way in order for it to be effective. And if, we can't pay working moms or dads childcare or whatever because we're not paying others.
Here's something I think we can do that Todd brought up that probably is relatively inexpensive. We can make the remote experience better.
Well, and it's already gotten considerably better from what I could see. I mean, you've participated in it more than I have.
Yeah, I did just in the last board meeting, actually, and I still thought the audio was good, the video was weak. And so I think there's room for us to improve there. And to try to get 50% of this experience for both the people in the room and the people away from the room is valuable too. Because the real goal is to be effective, right? That's the whole reason we're here.
Right, so they'd be on camera and be able to talk to everyone.
And do it in relative real time.
So
You're right, there's live there.
to expedite, because we haven't even gotten to Ron's yet, and we do have some presenters coming, can we direct our interim superintendent and Ms. Wood to look at best practices and legal practices to make sure that we're being effective? And that it is my personal opinion also that, board members, that we owe it to our stakeholders to be engaged and present in our board meetings. That's just my own opinion. I also noticed, Todd, is there any other ones?
Of the couple that I had to review, the other one that was due for review, I saw no changes that needed to be made. It was aligned with CASB, and I didn't see any recommended changes. So this is really the main one that I had feedback
Okay.
on.
So if you want to send your red lines and suggestions to Ms. Wood.
I made the edits on the Google Docs, so she
Oh,
already
okay.
has them. She's already responded to them.
I also noticed BE. I don't know that we need to still have June 2018 on there.
BE?
Yep. If you go down, up,
It was up a bit.
up a bit, keep going.
Beginning June 2018.
Yeah, probably can redline that out. Just say meetings of the board. And that might change because with new board members, that's the set time and date that we set for our cadence. But let's say when you guys are all have your new board assembled, and the 5 of you may decide to change that. But for now, that was just my suggestion on that. It wasn't mine, it was yours, Todd.
You're good.
All right.
Take it.
Okay, Mr. Schwartz, Ron, you are on deck. Can you do this in 10 minutes?
No.
Okay, okay.
What do you need? Amber or Vicky, can I trouble you guys to pull up the matrix? Please.
To go to meetings.
And while you're pulling that up, I suspect we may have to align some of our agenda to make sure that we are being respectful of our guests that will be coming in.
It downloaded. Go to your downloads.
Thank you. So after a very brief and painless juxtaposition with Mr. Norris's policies, what I attempted to do was put this in a summary format, and I looked at what the topic of each of my 5 were. Thank you, that's perfect. And when the latest revision was, and most importantly, why we have the policy, what's the intent? And then if there were any challenges and what my potential recommendation were. So for the first one, for example, we'll go right to the comments, unless, I certainly won't read this to you. You all can read very, very well. But it's logical and reasonable. There's a 24-hour notification window so that there's some consistency of how and where our notifications are posted. This is all about notifying people for board meetings. I thought it was fine. Questions? Next. Second one, BEDB. The intent of the policy is to have integrity inside the agenda and enough notice so people can be knowledgeable on the topics, whether they're people like James and Gordon that are highly interested in invest the time, or us that are participating and engaging in it, right? And all under challenges, all the board members have to be present and cast unanimous votes to amend an agenda, right? So there's really no minimum content standards for us to prep. What I think 72 hours seems to me like a quality amount of time to let everybody juggle their personal, business, and family lives and still look over the stuff. And it's more like, this is more likely about letting the public know than it is the board. But for us to do the diligence and be knowledgeable about what the topics are in especially a board meeting makes the meetings go faster, as I'm sure Tiffany would agree to. And so I think if we at least have a 72-hour minimum, especially since it's on a Monday, that's valuable. That was my recommendation there. Any thoughts, questions, or comments?
I have a quick thought.
Yeah.
I would love to see us get to a place where we put a lot on our plate of our staff when we're preparing. I'd love to see us as a board or the future board get in a cadence where initial agendas are published for the board a week in advance.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great goal.
For a time, we were
We agree.
doing that somewhat regularly. And then based on the workload of the staff, sometimes it, was
We need to be
4
better.
or 5 days in advance, because for a time, state law requires the agendas to be released 24 hours in advance. Our public actually typically has them on a Friday before the Tuesday meeting.
Right. That's the value of the weekend.
So,
But I think where Tiffany's coming from is if the board, meaning we, are a little bit more disciplined in really taking 30 minutes and reviewing the agenda in enough time so that if we have a question for the board president or the staff, those happen before the meeting. The meetings stay at the magic 2-hour window or less. Correct?
Yep.
That's usually good for everybody.
Well, having a week in advance gives us as a board time to study, gives the staff time to make, maybe tweaks or adjustments to documents. It gives the community an opportunity to really think about what the board is discussing, and do I need to make a comment? Do I need to lean in? So that's just a personal goal I have had.
Sounds like a best practice opportunity.
Yep.
And from a
And I-
staff standpoint, I wonder if maybe we ease into it. Right? So we say, okay,
Over the
look,
summer?
next board meeting we go for Thursday, the one after that we go for Wednesday, and so on and so forth. So you don't know we pull the wool over your eyes.
The
Summer would be
summertime.
a good time.
Summertime sounds like a great time because we don't have board meeting in July, so
Well, let's have one then and we'll test them. Should we keep going?
I also want to make sure that Ms. Wood isn't working on the weekends to try to get all of us,
Absolutely.
the cats, to herd the cats. Okay, yes, please.
Okay, I found a typo. So the one on the top, BEDD, the intent is to keep, it's what we just talked about, right? Keep board meetings dignified and productive and orderly. And so Robert's rules, I always laugh at this. Who is this Roberts person? And how did she or he make up these rules? And what gives them the right to tell us what to do? So I looked it up. And I think it actually comes from Britain.
It's parliamentary procedure.
Yeah, and it's ironic because I remember being in college and studying poli-sci and watching Parliament argue like a bunch of savages, and that was 40 years ago. Now look at our Congress, right? We've matured to the Brits model. It's too funny, but the bottom line is I think we should look at Robert's rules, and I apologize there for the typo. I think I wrote Robert's rules. And just make sure they're applicable for today. And I assume CASB probably does this on an annual basis.
So the reason that Robert's Rule parliamentary procedure is so important in board meetings, and it is the standard, is because, again, let's say you have a board that is in complete disagreement. It keeps the meeting flowing and fair and transparent and accountable, but it really keeps the meeting fair. So I don't know a board that doesn't use parliamentary procedure. We have a cheat sheet I can print up, and maybe
Yes,
that's a good
please.
work session or a good retreat, is for us as a board to go over the basics of Robert's Rules of Order.
But my intent here or recommendation was, none of us really know, except Tiffany, none of us know what these rules are. Somebody should probably look at this and just make sure it's practical for 2025. That's all.
Yep.
You guys agree? Okay.
It's very practical.
Next one, the intent of DE is to be open and transparent in our voting process. And we already talked about abstainment and recusal, right? And we actually talked about conflict of interest. So I think this is actually covered in the policies that Patty went through. This might be a bit of, I won't call it redundancy, but cautious overlap. Okay. Last one, BEDG, is really the intent is to have public records of everything that we do. And the only concern I have is that the secretary is solely responsible for approving the written minutes. And I wonder if we need just that whole idea of a second set of ears and eyes or a backup set of ears and eyes.
Don't we have that?
And this was all about being practical.
So are you is there some legalness to that one also on it has to be the president and the secretary that signs the minutes?
Oh, there likely is. I just it said in there the secretary is solely responsible.
Gotcha.
And I thought, boy, what happens if the secretary's not there that day? Or if the secretary, whatever, has an incredible leaning towards something and wants to make a change, and then there needs to be, or doesn't want to approve something for a personal agenda reason, and there should be a second set of ears and eyes. That's all.
So
It's
do you
just-
want to send any edits to Ms. Wood?
Happy to do that.
I believe it's the CASB version that does now state board secretary and president sign the minutes. And we have just recently implemented that practice, but have not changed policy.
Great. It sounds like the art of the practical wins here.
Okay. All right.
How many minutes?
Too many. Kidding.
3.
Okay.
Good.
Yes, sir.
I just want to follow up on one thing. We talked about the $50 limit earlier, and actually did get changed to 75 in 2023, and it changes every 4 years.
Brett, send it over.
And 75 matches what our current policy states, so that aligns.
$74.
Yeah. That was legislation, right?
Yes, it's
Okay.
based in legislation, and then it has an ethics commission that reviews that every 4 years.
Okay. Thank you, all of you, for going through this. I know that I knew this was going to take a long time, but I think that this was the work we needed to be able to get on board. I think the other items, in 5 minutes before our guests come, if it would please the board, on our agenda, we have a couple different things on here that we have yet to get to. We can table them until after our focus group, our B5. And here comes our guest now. So discuss, I can hit, if you don't mind, let's table number 2, number 3, and number 4 to after number 5. Or we can, actually, if you guys don't mind, we can discuss real quick a summer retreat timeframe. That's really quick. What that purpose will be is for us to get together as a board with our whoever our new superintendent is going to be so we can get on the same page, our summer retreat. And I'm going to share, if you all recall, we had a discussion as a board that I believe in succession planning, and I would like to see when we go into our new school year in August, starting off with, in June, doing a realignment of the board roles so that we will be able to have a president that's ready to roll and learn the position and really be ready to go, with me still on the board. And so a June retreat would be a good time to talk about things like Robert's rules and board evaluation. So if you would mind, Vicki, you and I can get together and let's get some dates sent out. I would like to do an off-site retreat away, just to breathe and reset. So it could be, there's several places, that place that we went up, that farm we did a few years ago, that was pretty neat. But do you mind if you and I we can get together and look at some locations and times and get it out to the board? But I just want to make sure the board is okay with a June retreat. We good with a June
Do
retreat?
you want to discuss any days or weeks that will not work so that we can look at dates
Yes.
around the board's availability? Are there any?
Dates that don't work? I would suggest us doing it after the end part of June, like towards our last June meeting.
So the week of the 16th potentially?
Does that work for the rest of the board?
I'm good that whole week except for the 19th.
That's my birthday. I'm not good on the 19th either.
I suggest the 19th.
19th is good.
I needed that day off to go to her birthday party. Yeah, I'm good any other day that week.
Anybody else have any conflicts in June?
Yeah, other than the 19th, that week is great. I have conflict the first week of June and the middle of the last week of June.
Okay. Are you getting that, Ms. Wood? Okay. So we'll look at that time frame. Does that work for you guys? Jean? Okay. So at this time, there's nothing we can really vote on, so I'm just going to take the privilege and we will come back to B2 and we will come back to B4 after our distinguished guests have presented. So that should only take about 10, 15 minutes and then we can break for lunch. So I'm taking that privilege. We're tabling those until after. We're good? We're good. Okay. So B5, Superintendent Interview Focus Groups Report. We have 3 guests in the room. We had, as the board recalls, yesterday, and we are actually dismissing Ms. Amber Wetstein is one of our candidates, and so is Dr. Adam Frank. So those 2 are being recused, and not only recused, but they're being sequestered.
With no technology.
So they're trapped with no technology, with four walls and a chair.
Are they abstaining or?
Just sequestering.
Maybe we'll give them some water and a piece of bread.
I'm recusal confusal.
Are they
So-
gluten-free?
So we had, Ms. Welsh, would you like to introduce and speak to the interview process from yesterday and where we are now?
Yes, I'll walk you through just a quick explanation. So as you may know I've updated the board throughout the process, but we have done our best to try to really engage our community. There was multiple ways for the community to be engaged. The first form that was sent out with an explanation of the situation included an opportunity for community members to submit desired attributes they're looking for in the upcoming superintendent, and also they could indicate whether or not they may be interested in participating in a superintendent advisory committee. We had a number of people submit feedback, both for the attributes, but also a great deal of interest in participating. So when I pulled together the group of participants for the Superintendent Advisory Committee, I tried to make sure to have coverage of each building. So the elementary schools, our middle 2 high schools, and Monument Academy all were present. There was at least 2 people from each elementary school and then 3 for middle and high schools. And we had one of the HR I don't know if she's a director or what she is, but she attended from MA, and then we had a couple different people who were there that have kids either at MA or MA and another location. We also had community members there and a great deal of staff members. We did collect questions from the community. I had 29 people submit questions. Some of them submitted just topics, others submitted questions, some submitted multiple ideas for questions. I did submit those questions to the board for review, and we ended up using many of the questions yesterday in our interviews. Some of them are part of today's questions that the board will be asking each applicant. Yesterday, we brought the team together. I think we ended up with 35 participants in the advisory committees. We divided into 3 groups. We each had different questions to ask. Each group did deliberate at the end and come up with pros and cons and sometimes questions or wonderings per applicant. And we have 3 of the group designees here to share out what the groups decided based on the feedback that was collected after each of the interviews. So for group 1, we have Donnell Potter from Bear Creek Elementary School. He's the principal. Group 2, Courtney Harrell, principal at the middle school. And group 3, Jeffrey Zick, upcoming principal at Lewis Palmer High School. So they're all going to come up here, and we'll start with Donnell. They'll each share out their feedback. Again, this is the group feedback. They're speaking on behalf of everyone. That Donnell, you're going to go to the other side.
You're
Then
right
you're
here.
not Jeff. Yeah, there you go.
Courtney,
Courtney went to the right chair. Well done. So again, they're sharing on behalf of the groups that they were in. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, all 3 of you, for being here, and welcome. And let's see, Donnell, do you want to start? Sure. And thank you so much, by the way, of giving your time and your energy and collecting the feedback from your groups and being a part of this process. Really appreciate it. So,
I'm breaking things. Hold on. There we go. Now we're good.
Mr. Potter.
All right. So you just want me to give an overview of what we had chatted about. I'm going to look at my notes here to give you some information. So you want me to give each individual candidate?
Yes, please. Pros and cons.
All right. So we can start with Mrs. Wetstein. So our group, after interviewing her, chatted a lot about how she gave us some information about how she is a community leader currently in our community, and she spent a good amount of time in her interviews speaking about stakeholder engagement and some of those things that have suited her in her role currently that stood out to our committee. Some pros of her also were she gave us some more concrete examples of some of the questions that helped our committee understand how she would approach the role, such as being present in classrooms, connecting with principals and other stakeholders. She talked a lot about connecting with students in our school district as well to get their input, which in many of her questions. I think some positives that came out is she currently obviously serves in the role. She presented herself as very detail-oriented and willing to take and gather ongoing feedback from all stakeholders, including the community, staff, and students, as I mentioned. She did, something that stood out from her as well as a pro was when we're talking about initiatives that the district is doing specifically with schools, there was some opportunity that she took to talk about how we are learning from neighboring school districts and gaining some momentum by seeking out others in the same field and learning from that, which stood out to our group. And just overall, she seemed to present a real realistic and aware planning for the execution of not only her entry into the role, but how she would approach moving forward in our school district. Yes, sir.
Yes, you may ask questions.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh.
But your microphone's off, I think.
I think they do that to me by design. Did she give examples when she talked about being detail-oriented, and were they credible?
She gave examples in many of the questions that, and I would say the group talked a lot about how, based off the examples, they have experienced the things that she was talking to and the examples she gave. So in that sense, I would assume that they would be credible. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Others? Okay. Areas of growth that we had talked about on some of the plans that she had spoke about, they were a little bit vague, and we would like to have a little bit more detail about some of the things. She was in some of the answers, she gave very explicit details, and some were a little bit more vague that we were looking for more. There was some uncertainty about moving forward or around like growing our schools academically and keeping a focus on the academic instruction, and some of the plans and things that were given out and some of those strategies were a little unclear to our committee. But I think she did present herself as a different type of superintendent that than we've experienced. She's presented herself as being seen as thoughtful and aware. She did talk a lot about how some of the feedback that we got from her is about being visible with various stakeholders, which was important to a lot of our community members, that they see the superintendent and know who they are. And I think she did have some idea and some plans about how we would move into the role and into the actual superintendent role and what that would look like short term and long term to keep things moving forward, which stood out to our group. I'm going to move on to Dr. Frank. All right. So with Dr. Frank, he presented to our group as someone who would be looking to build pretty strong relationships. He presented himself as like a big picture thinker around a lot of big initiatives, which stood out to our group as a positive. He spent a lot of his time talking about the team mindset and how he would work to that would be his goal, is to try to figure out how to move District 38 forward as a team, including all the stakeholders in that. He also presented himself as really optimistic and really looking for the positive in things, and which stood out to our group as well as a positive, as a strength. He did speak a little more clearly around his role as a big picture thinker, but then trying to figure out who the best people to fill those roles were and let them do their jobs, which stood out to our group. He did connect really well with the group with his answers. He was very engaging and very personable, which our group appreciated. He spent quite a bit of time trying to talk through as a strength, keeping morale moving forward along within our community, but also within our staff. Some other positives that came out was, I think the thing that kept coming up for us was that the global big picture, enthusiastic, positive outlook is really what we spent quite a good time talking about. He did speak a lot to data and specific things at PR and some things that he has done there, which we appreciated, having the specific numbers. I think our group noted as areas of growth for him was many of the answers were vague, or we felt like not necessarily completely answering the questions that we were asking and giving us hard, solid evidence and explanations of things that he was speaking to. And in some of our bigger picture pieces that we had asked about in terms of big things moving forward and how we would address those, that's where our group talked a little bit about was there enough detail and information in those answers to really have a good sense of us moving forward, or how we would attack those as a district and as a community. So there was some vagueness there. He did speak a lot to being people-focused, which I mentioned before. That was a general observation in all of his answers that we made. He talked a lot about developing people and putting people in the right spot and building connections and building relationships, which stood out as an observation. And he told us a lot of stories, which our group appreciated. He has a story-based approach to some of his answers. But I think, and he did speak, as did Mrs. Wetstein, around the strong ties of the community and how important they felt District 38 was, and Monument was, and their role in that was to be important as well. Yes, sir.
On the people-focused thing, did he give examples of how individuals through his work with them and growing them have accepted larger roles and become leaders for the general district team?
To that degree, no. We did not hear specific examples to that degree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
You're
Okay,
not done
so
yet, by the way.
I'm going to present each of ours in kind of 3 sections. So one being, just to be fully transparent, I'm going to read off what we had written down verbatim, so you can have just like the raw data of it. Then I'll give a quick summary, and then I'll do a concise key point of what we really felt was most important out of our conversations. And I am going to start with our interim superintendent, Amber Wetstein, because that's who came into our room first. Starting with our pro side of things, and this is just straight verbatim, not quick to respond, thoughtful, makes good eye contact when responding to questions, district-centered positive cover letter, limited rambling, succinct, values connections for all, presence, brought an entry plan to share with the team, very thoughtful plan. Already has a mentor, invests in her own learning, covered all desired attributes listed on the LPSD desired attributes list, genuine, involved in the community, attends events, this is in quotes, lead instructional leader, which equals superintendent, has 4 years of experience as an assistant superintendent and interim/acting in LPSD, validates teachers, balances business with education well, active listener, continued commitment to all students, humble, learns from setbacks, has experience in the role, empowers and mentors others, knows and spoke to district priorities. All right. For our summary, so this was to give like a feel of what the conversation was like as we created that list. Amber impressed the group with her thoughtful, reflective demeanor and strong communication skills, including consistent eye contact and concise, well-considered responses. She places high value on authentic relationships, demonstrating humility and a calm, intentional presence. Her entry plan was thorough and action-oriented, showing she's prepared to take initiatives while continuing to grow through mentorship. Her leadership experience is evident in her ability to balance instructional priorities with operational needs. She affirms and empowers educators, prioritizes special education, and effectively delegates within a capable team. Amber's deep understanding of district priorities, community involvement, and learner mindset reinforce her alignment with the district's vision. Her 4 years of leadership within LPSD include time as assistant superintendent and interim superintendent, add credibility to her candidacy. And then our key strengths that we noted, and this will be the same as what you've already heard, but what we felt was most important. Reflective and intentional, she avoids rushed responses. Strong eye contact and active listening. Succinct communicator, avoids rambling. Clear alignment with LPSD desired attributes. Brought a well-developed entry plan. Invests in personal growth through mentorship. District-centered mindset with a genuine presence. Validates teachers and emphasizes student outcomes. Balances instructional leadership with business acumen. Has meaningful community engagement. Demonstrates humility, resilience, and commitment to all students, experienced in the role and empowers others, well-versed in district priorities. All right, then when we looked at deltas, and we wanted to make this really clear as a group, that our deltas were not weaknesses, but instead wonderings, so questions that we would love to have answers to. So again, verbatim from our brainstormed list is transition from educational leader to district leader. Didn't speak much about her relationship with the board. Didn't speak to or about her relationship with the legislator. Is she too involved in the classrooms? Question mark. Micromanager? Question mark. Address the community without students in the system. Can she boldly stand behind her decisions? So here again, summary, so that you can get the feel in the room. The group expressed curiosity and some concern about Amber's ability to fully transition from an instructional to a broader district leadership role. Her relationship with the Board of Education and legislators was either unclear or simply not addressed. Some wondered whether her strong instructional presence might risk micromanagement or overly direct involvement at the school level. Additional feedback included a desire for more elaboration in some responses and questions about how she would represent families without students in the district. There was also uncertainty about how confidently she would stand behind bold or controversial decisions, and whether there might be any perceived conflicts of interest with external school system partnerships. And here again, our key areas: transitioning from educational to district-wide leadership, clarity on her relationship with the Board of Education, lack of mention of legislative engagement, potential for micromanagement due to deep classroom involvement, community engagement beyond families with students, confidence in making and defending bold decisions, transparency regarding school system partnerships. Questions?
I guess I'm going to own this mic, huh?
Yep.
That's great.
Vicki, you going to turn it off again? So there's some consistency in your particular group, Courtney, with perceived only capacity to stand behind the tough calls.
Right.
Why? What is it that the team saw or didn't see that led them almost on a consensus basis, it sounds like from listening to your notes, to that type of conclusion?
The example she provided to the group just simply didn't include something controversial or bold.
Was she asked that question?
No,
directly?
she was not. She was not.
Okay. This is a very opinionated question, so if you're uncomfortable answering it,
That's fine.
answer it anyways.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
If we had asked her a question, a very controversial question like, what, sex change athletics, which is in the news and everywhere today,
Yep.
and said, what is you or the team's gut, how she would have answered it? She said, you had to make a bold decision. The answer is no for the district. You have the power to do it. You're the superintendent. How are you going to handle it? That kind of question. Was there any kind of impression on how it would have been handled if it was asked?
I think she would have answered it in a very professional and concise way, but the essence of her answer, I'm not going to guess.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Okay,
Next
so
candidate.
then next are Palmer Ridge Principal, Dr. Adam Frank. And I'll do the same things. So verbatim from our list of pros is, will fight for the district, parentheses like he does for PR. Experience as a principal in the district, mentioned rift between the two high schools, spoke about nuanced topics, seems to have a sense of pulse on current topics. Business-minded, change theory, vision/adaptability, addressed funding and grants, seeing people and their differences from their own shoes, willing to have conversations with the, quote, no people, was a CT coordinator at one point, committed to the community, embraces pathway differences, energy, described structure, de-escalating collaboration, relational during challenging conversations, addressed perceived lack of secondary experience at the district level, spoke to interactions he would have with the board, geographical breach, meaning experience, oh, that's a typo, reach, I should say geographical reach, not breach.
Who
Sorry
typed
about that. Experience in districts and other states. So then our summary here is Adam demonstrated a strong grasp of current and nuanced district issues, approaching leadership with a vision-driven mindset grounded in change theory. His business acumen was evident, particularly in his suggestion of securing grants and addressing funding challenges. He consistently showed empathy by considering diverse perspectives and embracing pathway differences within the district. Adam's leadership style includes structured, de-escalating collaboration and strong relational skills, especially during difficult conversations. He communicated confidence in working with the school board and showed readiness for a broader leadership role through his experience as a district principal and former career and technical coordinator. His energy, community commitment, and willingness to confront challenges, such as the high school divide and district-wide cohesion, further highlight his leadership potential. So some key strengths that we noted: clear understanding of current district challenges, visionary and adaptable through change theory, business-minded, addressed grants and funding, empathetic and inclusive of diverse pathways, willing to engage with dissenting voices, strong communicator with the board, structured, de-escalating collaborative style, experience as district principal and CT coordinator, geographic and professional breadth, committed to community and improving cohesion, high energy and enthusiasm for the role. Okay, then for our deltas, and these we felt were concerning statements. We didn't have wonderings, we had concerns. No mention of MA outside of budget. Lack of awareness/growth mindset, question mark. Quoted arrogance aside, he said that during the interview. He has a gut feeling about safety issues, parentheses, versus speaking to a process for how to address. Influence room, question mark. Reference politics many times. Uses I versus we. Where's the team references, question mark. Speaks to knowing this area and said that there are two towns, Monument and Palmer Lake. Spoke in analogies versus speaking to experience. Did not answer questions succinctly. Fabrication of facts, numbers, statistics. Quote, fight for PR. Would he exacerbate the rift, question mark. Lack of district-wide perspective. Comes across as condescending. Condescending. Right. Our summary. Concerns emerged about Adam's executive presence, self-awareness, and growth mindset. At times, he relied on analogies instead of concrete experience, and his use of questionable or inaccurate statistics raised credibility concerns. His mention of, quote, fighting for PR was seen as potentially deepening the perceived rift between the high schools. There were also questions about his district-wide perspective, as he did not address Monument Academy beyond budget concerns or speak broadly to the wider community. His use of I over we, occasional condescending tone, and frequent political references suggested a need for greater team orientation and professionalism. His approach to safety, relying on instinct rather than process, was also noted as an area for improvement. His stated disregard for district-level leadership further undermines the collaborative nature of District 38. Finally, his lack of superintendent experience was considered a gap in readiness for the role. Key areas: executive presence and influence in high-level settings, overuse of analogies versus direct experience, accuracy of data and statistics, growth mindset and self-awareness, team-oriented language and tone, broader district and community perspective, structured approach to safety, impact of, quote, fight for PR language on high school divide, avoiding political framing, readiness for the superintendent role. Questions?
Questions, sir?
Yeah, real quick, his references to I instead of we, were those questions, let me think about how to ask this. When he answered those, when he answered them with I, were those decisions he made and implemented for the team to execute?
For some, yes, and for others, no.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're a reflective group right now.
Oh, I get that. That's fine. I appreciate that. I think you should reflect.
Okay. And then last, Jeff?
All right, I was in group 3. We had a good group, a lot of good discussion, so I followed somewhat of a similar format as the middle school or the group 2, but we're going to go through the highlights. I don't have it included verbatim. I do have that if it's needed, but we're just trying to summarize. We wrote on the whiteboard and wrote out notes, so trying to just make it more succinct on here. So I'll start with, we also had Amber first, so I'll start with her highlights, and then I'll do a summary of kind of how we felt, and then go through considerations and so on. So some highlights, individual highlights. We had the authenticity of her responses gave her credibility with the interview committee. People are the tradition. She said that a couple times, and that really resonated with the group. Build strong relationships with students and families. Clear community-specific answers. That was a big topic of conversation throughout the discussion. Was she gave a ton of specifics and how she would do it, and I think the group appreciated that. She's very strategic and process-oriented thinker, so anytime there was a scenario question, she talked through the whole process. The group liked that. Invests in developing others and promoting mentorship. So she, again, on that people theme, she talked about how we develop people, whether it's recognition, whether it's mentorship, and whatever that looks like. She talked about that a lot. She I kind of touched on that, prioritized professional growth and recognition. She had multiple examples that she's done in the past at D38, and she had some new ones she was thinking for the future. So we like both of those things. Values student voice and involvement, demonstrates authenticity. Again, it was a big topic, authenticity. They trusted what she was saying, and it was hard for the group. We were trying to follow the norms and make sure, but everybody has personal experiences with these people. So a lot of the comments were, what she said is what I've seen type of thing. So there was a bit of discussion around those topics. She experienced tough decisions with the CIC, or the Career Innovation Center, and the Grace Best thing, so she's had experience dealing with those things. And she mentioned that in her interview, so I had responses along those lines. She was committed to safety and collaborating with expert guidance in all her decision-making. So our narrative on Amber regarding her strength, Amber was recognized by Group 3 for her strong connection to the community and her appreciation for the district's traditions, students, and families. She demonstrated a thoughtful and strategic mindset on nearly every question in the interview, which was supported by solid knowledge base and a detail and process-oriented leadership style. She offered many specific examples about how she led different initiatives, including her involvement in polarizing decisions like the CIC and Grace Best. Our group especially loved her focus on developing people, valuing mentorship, and recognizing staff contributions. Amber's responses were highlighted by her authenticity and her relational capacity. She also showed a commitment to safety, strategic priorities, and collaborative decision-making through expert input. Areas of growth, or should I stop for questions or jump right into areas of growth?
Quick one.
Yep.
In your notes, your team mentioned community interactions several times.
Yep.
Do you happen to have an example or two of those?
Yeah, she talked about Kiwanis, trying to remember, you were also in our group, I'm trying to think of specific ones that I don't have down, but she talked about just being out and being a visible presence in the community. I don't know about specific examples offhand. Mr. Brampton, do you? Was it? She used that as a microcosm for the whole idea of being visible in the community, and she talked about why that was important and how she'd like to continue to expand her role in that, of doing more things like that. So I don't know if she spoke on a lot more specifics.
Okay, thanks.
Considerations, there wasn't a lot. They were worried about her tendency to overanalyze. So while she was a process thinker, they wondered kind of the whole stand behind a decision, a tough decision, and there wasn't a lot of answers that lent itself to saying, I'm going to boldly stand behind something. So I like those words that were used before. But the group kind of felt maybe she overanalyzed. We had one question in there. Our final question was, what do you do in limited information? In a crunch time, you know, you don't have all the information, you don't have a process, what do you do? And they thought she left some things on the table there that she could have answered more decisively. But other people in the group, so there's a lot of argument around that question because other people in the group felt that she articulated that usually those are safety concerns. So when those things happen, it's a safety concern, it's something that happens in the moment, and those are the most quick answer questions that she's faced so far in her role. But she also, the other group thought it was an advantage that she talked about consensus building and trying to avoid those quick decisions to the best of her ability and trying to get consensus and value and input from all the stakeholders. So there's a lot of back and forth on that question. Hey, she should have been more decisive in her answer. Other people like she values input and consensus and working through and involving all the stakeholders. So we had a little bit of back and forth on that one. And then thought along those same lines on that question that she was limited in her response on crisis management. So if there was a crisis in the district, they thought maybe she could have expounded on that a little bit better. And that's what we had for Amber. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, Adam was our second person we saw in our room. Some committee, I'll do the let's flip that around. I'll just do the highlights that we had on the board. Visionary and philosophical leadership style, big thinker, global thinker. He was confident and dynamic as a speaker, and his presence had a lot of energy in the room when he came into the room. Focused on student experience. So he reverted back to that a lot on the answers is we got to talk about the student experience. We need to view this from the student's lens and think about this even at this higher up role. The students are what matter. He demonstrates strategic planning on his resume, but on the flip side, I know we're getting to the considerations, but on the flip side, some people thought he didn't speak to that in the interview. So they saw a conflict there, like, hey, he did articulate some things in his resume, but we wish he would have spoke on it in the interview, so we didn't see that. He expressed a high level of trust of the people around him. So that was a theme as well, that he wants to empower people, he wants to let people do their job and make sure that they have the recognition once they do that talked about not wanting credit. He's willing to face difficult challenges. On that same final question, he talked about an instance where he was in a tough scenario and went full bore into it. And then they wrote on there as well that there's high potential for future leadership roles. Strengths questions?
Team?
Areas for growth. He needed more specifics. So on how, so the philosophical global thinking versus the how became a topic of conversation on Adam or Dr. Frank is, okay, he talked about big ideas, but did he tell us any time how he was going to achieve that? So that was the back and forth in the room of, hey, if some people expressed, we had one member that expressed, hey, that appeals to me. I'm a details guy. I want the philosophical big thinker at the top. Other people said they have to know the how, they have to have a process. If you don't, then things are going to be lost and it's going to come back to haunt us in the end. So there's a lot of discussion back and forth on that. Didn't really demonstrate any specifics regarding strategic planning or the future direction of the district. So when he left, we were wondering, okay, what is his vision? Where does he see this going? Minus what was on his resume in the written part of the interview process. There was kind of a lot of concern over, fabrication seems a rough word, but it was used here, of numbers and things that he'd used. I think enrollment was something that he mentioned, and the group was frustrated that they thought that what he was citing was inaccurate along lines of enrollment. They had limited district leadership experience, but while that wasn't a non-qualifier for him, they thought that he should have addressed that more clearly and talked about what it might be in this, how he might transition to the role. And then the big one was the team was concerned about specific answers lacked awareness and sensitivity to specific individuals and groups. So he gave an elementary and high school example where he equated it to the governor of California's high school. The governor of Wyoming is elementary. There are a lot of elementary people in the room, so many of them thought that was kind of dismissive to their efforts and things. So he also did the two towns and talked specifically about Woodmore not being, so there's people from Woodmore, so like maybe the tact in answering the question was called into question. And then also we had some MA representation in there, and the disregard for MA people not being mentioned or not being a part of anything was brought up in the group. And then he didn't really, again, kind of already spoken this, didn't really fully acknowledge gaps or areas of professional growth for himself. So the summary, I'm going to probably be repetitive here to some degree. Some committee members thought Adams' philosophical responses often lacked specificity, and depth. Additional concerns included limited district level experience, absence of key references, and vague and incomplete responses about his qualifications and understanding of the broader district challenges. While the committee did not see the lack of district experience as a non-qualifier, some discussed that Adam would have done better, showing that he understood the role and the district dynamics better. So that kind of concludes it. Any questions on any of that?
Any questions from the team to any of our panelists?
Yes.
Sir?
I have a question for all three. Really simple, one-word answer. On the coachability metric, on a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the most coachable and 1 being the least, what number would your team rank based on what you heard and saw each candidate? Dunno?
I'm thinking here.
Do you want a minute? We can go to somebody else.
You know, that wasn't I don't know if that was a topic of discussion.
It wasn't. I'm asking your
I-
team's thoughts.
I would say, based off the conversations we had, I would say Amber would likely respond better to coaching from our team's perspective, and that Dr. Frank may in some cases, but may not in others, would be kind of how I would summarize our conversation about specific feedback.
Okay, thank you. Courtney?
I would say that because Amber identified a few different areas where she was seeking professional growth,
Correct.
independent of what has been essentially assigned or requested of her, I would put her at a 9.
Yeah.
And I do believe that the group would feel the same way. For Adam, he did not mention seeking professional growth, nor did he appear to have any open-mindedness towards it. So I would put it much lower. I would rank him probably around a 3.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
I'd say very similar. I mean, Amber spoke in length about what she was going to do to grow into the role, and even though she's had experience in the interim capacity, what steps she would take with surrounding districts, with her own professional development, and trying to address that. So very high, maybe 9 for Amber. Adam, more, it's a tougher call because I think he, to the group, came off confident and that he was ready and tried to portray that he was really ready for the role and maybe to address concerns that he hasn't had district leadership experience. But in doing so, he came off somewhat just trust me and let me go type of situation. So maybe less so for Adam, maybe 4 or 5.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? We're just reflecting. Thank you for coming and presenting, and I think it's good that we're in a school district where we have some strong, stellar leaders, both from our buildings and in our community and in our leadership. And so I appreciate the delta and the pluses and the deltas and the room for growth and the room for, I think that's also reflective that each of us could use anyway. So thank you and the group dynamics and how you came together in your discussion. Thank you very much. I appreciate it personally.
Very much appreciated. Really helped me for going forward today.
Anybody else?
Yeah, one other thing. All your teams did a quality, comprehensive job, and thank you for taking the time out of your day jobs to summarize it. This is a bit of an important decision. We want to make sure we get it right. And there's no way anybody can hire an executive based on a 1 or 2 hour conversation and interaction. Right? It's unheard of. The public sector, unfortunately, forces us to do things in a certain way, likely because people have abused freedoms that they've had in the past, and then we get put into a bit of a box. So we do the absolute best in the box that we are forced to be in, but you help us build the mosaic that enables us to make a quality decision, so thank you. It very much matters.
Yep. And no matter who lands in this space, we have 2 quality leaders that will continue to lead in our school district and work with you guys. So thank you.
I would like to thank Donnell, Courtney, and Jeff for doing this. I understand it's a little bit of a difficult situation considering they're both peers to them. And I just appreciate you guys doing this. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And happy Staff Appreciation Week. And next week is everybody's last week of school. So hang in there.
Do the principals get recess now?
The principals, you may have recess now.
Thank you so much.
I enjoyed looking at the screensaver. Those are all Bear Creek Bears right there.
Okay, thank you. All right. So moving on to, I know that you need to bolt pretty quickly, but I think number 2 and number 5 will go very quickly. Number 2, specifically,